that popped in on this real estate market, and I think it's somewhat indicative of a lot of the questions that we get. So Dylan, why don't you kind of start us off on the discussion about market updates in real estate? So this is Terry and Denise, who actually live in Hawaii Paradise Park on the Big Island. They say, after recently purchasing on the Big Island and with a presidential election and COVID-19, where do you see the market in 5 years? So Dylan, give us a combination of both your planned market update for this week and a little bit of an answer to what Terry and Denise are wondering about.
Well, first thing, I don't have any market data per se because our MLS is a little bit slower on the Big Island. So our data doesn't come out to usually 7-8 days into the following month. But I can just tell you from what I'm experiencing, the volume is still there. There is, we're definitely on the road to recovery, and the demand is still there. We closed 3 deals last week and put 3 more into escrow. So there wasn't any, we're not seeing any slowdown. There was another closing today, and potentially another escrow today. So there's still a lot of activity. I don't see any reason to believe, and again, we don't have a crystal ball and we can't predict the future, but I don't have any reason to believe that in 5 years the market isn't going to continue to be strong. And we haven't had that bubble type market, and everybody's worried about the bubble bursting. But if you compare the market today to the market back in 2006 and 2007, there's a lot of other underlying factors like the lending regulations that were running wild and people getting loans that shouldn't get loans, and that stuff's not happening today. So I think going forward, you don't have too much to worry about, and especially in areas like East Hawaii where you're not as dependent on tourism. You're not going to have as many people that can't pay their mortgage, or a lack of buyer demand, because a lot of people that work there work in the industries that are in Hilo or for the government, the state or county government. So the employment's a little bit more stable in that area. So it depends on your market too.
Got it. So what I'm hearing you say is pretty much, no major changes. Things are still going strong. There's no reason to kind of think that there's going to be any kind of major upheaval in either direction. I think part of that reason why is, as I used to tell people, because we don't take part of the party of the bubble, we don't go to the party. We also don't get the hangover. Scott, what's the latest on kind of what you're seeing on Oahu?
Yeah, we're on a shutdown right now, meaning that economically, but so what that means for real estate at this point is we are classified as essential. Transactions are still going, and I'm still seeing the same thing. So actually our number of sales for single family homes has gotten back to where we were pre-COVID period. However, there were 1,600 new listings on the market last year at this time for single family homes, and there's now 800. So significantly less inventory, a lot more buyer demand. So, and this isn't totally normal. I mean, I talked about that transaction last week, 16 offers, $100,000 over, we lost it. Right. I just talked to someone in Mililani. They had 25 offers on a property in Mililani on a single family home.
25 offers on a property?
Yeah. So there's competition.
So this trend that you've mentioned, Scott, over week upon week, which has been that there's a lot less listings on the market, but there are just as many, if not more, buyers on the market, and I think that combined with this lower interest rate or something like that, right?
Yeah, I would actually say there are less buyers in the market just because you've eliminated the offshore buyer. But
less buyers, right?
But the decrease in number of sellers versus the number of buyers is greater on the listing side. The other thing is the military 2 months ago just started moving people again, which Oahu has all the bases. This is where they come to. So that added to the demand. And then our summertime is the busiest time of the year for moving because kids are out of school typically, et cetera. And that's where families tend to try to plan their moves. So we're definitely right in the middle of this summer rush, which carries typically through September. And we don't tail off like the mainland because of the cold weather. We have warm weather all year round. People can move and see property fairly easily because of the temperatures. So we do continue throughout the year, but we are in the chunk of our busiest time.
Got it. Thanks, Scott. Heidi, what's the situation like? What's the market looking like in Maui? What can you share for us? And back to that original question, if you have any sense of kind of what do you see kind of going on in a 5-year period, if you can shed any light on that.
Well, August was a really strong month on Maui in terms of closings and also new properties going under contract. Extremely busy month. We're seeing more homes than condos selling in previous years. So demand for single family homes is very high. I mean, we're seeing more inventory come on the market for condos. I mean, both residential condos and resort condos. Here and there, you'll get a super motivated seller, but for the most part, prices are holding really strong. There are people that are predicting that once the quarantine lifts, there's going to be a flood of buyers in our market because there certainly seems to be a lot of demand. Sales are a bit limited because buyers who do want to travel to Maui find it more difficult with the quarantine these days, understandably. There's recent discussion on the new federal eviction moratorium through the end of the year and how that's going to impact the market. There are owners who own rental properties who have been personally impacted by COVID or lost their jobs, and then their tenants have lost their jobs, and that's a challenge. So that could have some impacts down the road, but probably nothing is going to happen right now. But it continues to be a busy market. I mean, overall, all the stats point to it being pretty stable. We're seeing a little bit more inventory in the condo market right now. So I think for a buyer who's looking to have a bit less competition than normal, wouldn't be a bad time to look over on Maui.
Heidi, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think we touched on this in some of our off-camera discussions, and I think we should touch base on that a little bit and talk amongst ourselves on that. And that is, I think, this idea that there's a general feeling or a general sentiment that there is pent up demand that's being sort of held back, and when COVID gets lifted, if that ever happens, if COVID gets lifted, there's going to be this sort of, kind of rush of potential buyers. And so the feeling that I've caught, and let's kind of quickly go around and touch on this topic. Dylan, we'll start with you. We talked about this idea that, hey, if you're a potential buyer and if you're serious about buying, you might want to try to, go through the quarantine hurdles. If you need to come over here, go through those quarantine hurdles and get in front of the buyers that will inevitably be coming. In other words, there was potentially a window of opportunity here for you if you sort of beat the crowd. Dylan, what's your sort of beat the crowd feeling on that?
Absolutely, no doubt about that. I mean, every day I talk to somebody who can't wait to come here and look for property. But there are some. I wrote a $600,000 cash offer yesterday for a couple that made the decision to just come out here, quarantine for their 14 days, and they had the luxury of taking a 3 or 4 week trip out here in order to serve the quarantine and look. But that was their mindset, is we want to get out of where we're at on the East Coast and get here as soon as possible. And so they're, one of those, the house that I closed on today was also a buyer from California that wanted to get here sooner rather than later, and came out, served their quarantine, and then purchased, and went back to the main, made the offer, inspected, and then went back to the mainland and closed, and is coming back today to serve out their second quarantine in their new home. But there's definitely there are few people that are taking the initiative in doing that. But if you wait 2, 3, 4 months, once things open up, everybody who's been waiting is going to be here, and it's going to be a lot more competitive market.
Okay, so that's Scott, we're going to go to you in a second. I kind of really want to emphasize that, and I guess I want to kind of sort of essentially pitch the benefit of being a part of our Ohana here. There's 30 people live that are watching this right now. You folks are getting this kind of right on the line, and you're getting it in what I really love about what we've done, and I so appreciate you, Heidi, and you, Scott, and you, Dylan, for being a part of this, because this is the only show that I know of where we get like a statewide kind of analysis, every 2 weeks. Scott, are the gates of buyers waiting to be busted down when quarantine comes around?
Absolutely. I mean, Dylan hit the nail on the head, and I had that conversation this morning. I've had it probably 7 times in the last 2 weeks with people going, "Hey, we're waiting." I said, "Hey, look, maybe you don't want to wait, and here's why. Rentals are more affordable right now. You have more flexibility on the length of time that you could do a rental. Yes, you have to quarantine for 14 days, but if you got a place for 2-3 months or however long you need it, to kind of get situated in this stuff, you got more flexibility on the rental side to be able to get here and get settled. There's, less demand from people. You have more to choose from. You can be more flexible with that rental price. So now once you do to 2 weeks. Now you can get out in the market without the rest of the mainland buyer pool being right there with you. You're out ahead of them. So, you know, old supply and demand, you add more demand to the situation. I don't see the supply increasing. That should lead to a price increasing or more competition on the buy side.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, you know, you're it's like those, you know, those midnight sales for like Black Friday, right, where you're able to get into the store before everybody else. That's kind of what it sort of feels like here. So
Let's hope we don't see any Walmart fighting over
no,
houses.
there'll be no Walmart fighting.
And two other quick points on this. You know, one is a lot of people are already teleworking, right? So if you're sitting at home teleworking anyways, you can come here and sit in a hotel room and telework from here. So you're not really taking a vacation per se, right? You're just working from a different place. And then the second one is we're seeing a lot already right now of competitive offers like Scott was talking about with multiple offers. So if you're a buyer who doesn't have cash or doesn't have 50% or 25% to put down, you would put yourself in a better position now being here with less competition, because I'm seeing all across the state where people who are doing, you know, VA loans, FHA loans that are low down payment, you basically have the least amount of, or you have the weakest offer when you're up against cash. You're up against somebody who's putting 50% down. So if you're in that type of situation financially where you want to take advantage of a low down payment loan program, or you just can't do that and you're going to do maybe a 10% down program or something like that, it's better to do it now than it is later when everybody with cash shows up and is bidding on those same houses.
This is back to that same idea of sort of get in before the wave that all of us unanimously here, Heidi has, every one of you, Heidi, Scott, and Dylan, you've all said, hey, no question, this wave is coming. I think that's a fair thing. And Scott, I know that you're working with Teresa and them folks, and she wants to be first in line. Well, come on down, Teresa. We definitely want to have you here. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, yeah, one last thing I wanted to mention, because if I'm not mistaken, so Oahu economically is shut down right now, or we're doing the stay-at-home order again, but the outer islands aren't, correct? So for us, there are no open houses right now, which means private showings, which means we're a little restrictive on the flow. But where I'm really seeing some of the challenges, kids are back in school now, so they're doing stay-at-home, you know, distance learning from home. So now when I get a transaction into escrow, I have a difficult time because the home inspectors don't want anybody in the home when they want to do the home inspections. The families that are living there have their kids. They're working from home and the kids are studying from home. Now I have a significant challenge for trying to set up that home inspection appointment for everyone to be out. So our inspection timeframes and contracts are starting to move out a little further. Just an FYI, that's probably, you know, kind of good info. I'd like to hear what you guys doing. Are you guys seeing anything similar to that?
Dylan, you see anything?
Yeah, well,
this is the home inspection thing. There's families in the home that the home needs to be inspected, but the inspector wants them out, but they're in because they're working, etc. How's that?
Termite inspection, survey, the whole 9 yards.
All that stuff.
It's definitely more complicated, and it's also more complicated for sellers because they got to go somewhere, right? And so I think that's part of the reason there's less inventory is people are not as comfortable figuring out where they're going to move to. And so you have those two factors that are kind of slowing things down, but definitely getting into houses, and a lot of appraisers don't even want to go inside, which sometimes is a benefit to a buyer, because if they're not seeing the actual condition on the inside, you know, if it's not good, you know, there's less of a chance of that appraisal coming in low. But there's a lot of appraisers that are just doing exterior appraisals right now.
All right, let's this is great. Love this talk. I just love the whole idea that we get this sort of statewide perspective. We get Maui, Big Island, and Oahu perspectives. It's just absolutely fabulous. I love it. Really quick, Ralph asked a question here about drought conditions.